Can a telephone call survey really determine malnourishment levels in a country? International organization Global Hunger Index thinks so. Namaste, hello, and welcome to Know This. I'm your host Priyanka Deo, and here's what you need to know. India has one of the most malnourished populations on planet Earth, says international organization Global Hunger Index, or the GHI, in its recently published survey report. Even more shocking, according to GHI findings, countries that are hard hit with the coronavirus, including Pakistan and Nepal, have less undernourished people than India. The Indian government has raised an objection to the report. Now, it challenged the methodology of GHI's findings and called the report, and I quote, devoid of ground reality. So what does the GHI report say? What factors does it consider? Is the methodology correct, or is the government of India correct in rubbishing it? To figure this out, we need to understand where the report came from and the factors that the report considered to derive its conclusions. The Global Hunger Index website tracks malnutrition across nations. This specific report found that India had a score of less than 5 based on 4 indicators. Number 1, undernourishment. Number 2, child wasting. That's the number of children under age 5 who have low weight for their height. Number 3, child stunting. That's minors under age 5 who have low height for their age. And finally, number 4, child mortality for minors under the age of 5 as well. Now, each of these factors is given a standardized score on a 100-point scale, which is then aggregated for each country. The GHI report released earlier this week stated that India is in worse shape compared to its neighbors, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal, based on these 4 indicators. In fact, of the 116 countries that were ranked in this report, 18 nations, including India and China, received a score of less than 5. The report was prepared by Ireland's aid agency Concern Worldwide and German organization Welthungerhilfe, which noted that the level of hunger in India was, and I quote, alarming. In response, India's Ministry of Women and Child Development said that the GHI and its publishing agencies had not done their due diligence and that the methodology used was unscientific and did not take into account necessary indicators and circumstances. Is this true? The government of India stated, and I quote, they've based their assessment on the results of a 4-question opinion poll which was conducted telephonically by Gallup. Additionally, the report also completely disregards the government of India's large-scale effort to ensure food security of the entire needy population. That's 800 million people during the peak of COVID-19. The opinion poll does not even ask the essential questions such as whether the person received any food support from government agencies. And it wasn't just the government that gave food support in India. Many private entities, NGOs, and self-help groups helped on a large scale as well. One example is women's self-help group supported by the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, which is partially financed by the World Bank. They were mobilized to run community kitchens, restore fresh food supplies, provide food support to vulnerable and high-risk families, and even provide financial services in rural areas. These self-help groups evolved over the past 15 years, and they tap into the skills of approximately 62 million women across the country. In addition to this, the GHI report also marked improvement in the ranks of Afghanistan and Nepal. Now, it's great to see these countries improve their conditions, but the government of India correctly elaborates that the GHI report did not consider COVID-19 as a factor at all. On the contrary, the report showed that these countries seem to be unaffected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is empirically incorrect. Both Afghanistan and more so Nepal were ravaged by the coronavirus, particularly in its second wave. In Nepal, millions of children are now at a greater risk of suffering from malnutrition as socio-economic fallout brought about by COVID-19 crisis is causing more harm to the country's younger population than the disease itself. Before the pandemic, the UN agency UNICEF estimated that 43.5% of children in Nepal under the age of 5 suffered from malnutrition. The pandemic has adversely influenced this number. According to Karen Courtney Haag, who's the chief of nutrition for UNICEF's office in Nepal, I quote, it is estimated that there will be a 14.3% case increase in child wasting due to the secondary impacts of COVID-19. It's a matter of concern that an international organization like the GHI has published an inaccurate report which was prepared against the laid-down procedures. This should set alarm bells ringing. On its website, the Global Hunger Index says that it is dedicated to comprehensively measuring and tracking hunger at the global, regional, and national levels. But hiring agencies to make phone calls to ask the height and weight of the participant or its kin is no way to determine hunger index and malnourishment. These agencies needed to send representatives to India and all countries included in the report to physically take accurate height and weight measurements of the population samples. In addition to this, observing and taking note of the amount of food consumed and where the food was coming from is also crucial in accurately ranking these countries. Furthermore, all factors need to be taken into account to rank countries accurately. For starters, the impact of COVID-19 needed to be taken into account. Nations were ravaged by the spread of the coronavirus and are still struggling to overcome the after effects of the COVID-19 infection. The pandemic wasn't even considered in this report, especially in case of countries like Pakistan and Nepal, where food shortages happened on a national scale because of COVID-19. In Pakistan's case, inflation in the prices of staple food items not being considered is also surprising because it puts such food items out of reach for the poor. And if COVID-19 was a major factor that affected malnourishment, just as important as is the amount of food support provided to the population by the government and private firms. This factor has also been ignored by the report, which questions its entire credibility not just for India, but for all countries that were ranked. This is problematic because the Global Hunger Index is an internationally recognized survey. The report's inaccurate findings on India were published by multiple mainstream media platforms across the world. This resulted in the spreading of false and misleading information globally. With that being said, it's important that readers don't buy into this misinformation. One must always question sources and methodology in the information that one consumes before forming opinions and conclusions. The government of India, therefore, has correctly dismissed the GHI report as, and I quote, devoid of ground reality. Thanks for watching Know This. I'll see you next time. Until then, this is Priyanka Deo signing off. Namaste.